This is the High Desert Luthiery podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the High Desert Luthiery podcast meets the Stringed Instrument Roadshow podcast with Tobin Schaefer. So, Tobin, if you haven't gone back in our podcasts, and it's been quite some time since Allison and I put any new content out, I mean, we have a pile of old interviews to go through, which we will be doing here hopefully soon. Tobin was my first interview, and I'm sure if I go back and listen to it, it'll be hilarious. Just cutting my teeth, trying to follow the script and all that stuff. But it's nice to kind of get back into this once again with Tobin, a very good friend of mine from the Santa Cruz area in California, and a fellow former SCGC, Santa Cruz Guitar Company employee. Also, very talented luthier. We could see some of his work behind him, very inspirational, very outside the box thinking. And it's really exciting that you have taken the initiative to say, I really like what these guys are doing. I'm inspired with the High Desert Luthiery, and I want to put something of my own together in my area. Is that fairly accurate?
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to do an extension of High Desert Luthiery, but you're like, oh no, dude, just do your own thing. So I had said, I'm ready to go. As a Central Coast California resident, since Healdsburg was shut down years ago, the only thing that happens in California around luthiers is the NAMM show. I mean, I think Guild of American Luthiers does some stuff sometimes too, but I don't hear about it very often unless I'm a member. The point being is that, when you got to Albuquerque and you were talking about creating community, and you and I had a lot of conversations around that. And in Santa Cruz, there's kind of already this pre-built Luthiery community because there's so many people who worked at Santa Cruz and then stayed in the area, and a lot of people keep in touch. But at the same time, small shop builders just don't get press. They don't get any limelight that helps them. And, you know, kind of talking with you and watching what HDLI started doing and then actually attending as my first show for Boutique Laboratory Guitars, it was obvious that this kind of platform, this type of environment gives the small shop luthier a huge opportunity to shine, get out into the community, talk to some people who maybe didn't even know that they built instruments or even get a chance to even play their instruments because maybe they're having a hard time making it into stores, this, that, and the other thing. The store owners can come and check out product. They can just come by and check out a booth and say something if they want to or remain anonymous, but at least see the product. And this just seems like something that's really in need. I was able to attend the Santa Cruz Guitar Company Christmas party this year, which they'd had for the first time since the pandemic. And when Richard kind of did his speech to the party, just to kind of welcome everybody and whatnot, that was actually one of the key points of his talk was about small shop builders in the current market and environment, post-COVID, whatnot, that really need to up the patronage for the small shop people so that they're still around and continue to build instruments. And I think ultimately that's the goal. I know you've inspired me a lot since I've met you, and there's more of that, energy to spread around. So thank you for being you, first off, and some of your crazy and wild ideas. And thank you for picking up the torch on HDLI.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's definitely my pleasure. You touched on a few things that stuck out to me right now. Number one is opportunity for small luthiers to, show their work, to be seen, to be heard. And that's kind of a tender spot to me. I think that, in the beginning, I can only speak for myself, but in the beginning, my goal was just to figure this thing out, right? Figure out how to make a guitar, how to make it work. And it was never how to be seen until I left Santa Cruz, or more accurately, I parted ways. There's going to be people listening to this going, wait a minute, that's not accurate. So for the sake of accuracy, when I parted ways with Santa Cruz, I
And you're
was
talking about the guitars, not Santa Cruz, the area.
the Santa Cruz Guitar Company, SCGC. After parting ways, you go from sort of being in the limelight, having all of the magazines come through, having all the players come through, and kind of being recognized to being nobody again, right? And it was really startling. And it kind of inspired me or pushed me to be more active on my social media because that was never important to me. I used to think that it was like a generational thing, and I keep meeting young people that aren't really too interested in social media. And so, that goes to show me, okay, well, this isn't like, that sort of thing. It goes across the board. There's people that are into it, there's people that aren't into it. I've never even been good at taking pictures of all of my work and documenting all of my work. More accurately, it's for me. Even if I'm making something for somebody else specifically, I do this for me. I just love it. I've learned more recently to really appreciate the work afterwards because there's a certain amount of heartbreak that I experience when I hand off an instrument to somebody, like more so than excitement. And I mean, that's something I've only discovered recently, right? But the value of being seen and recognized and appreciated for the work that you're doing, that's a strong one. That's a big motivation in the HDLI. So to hear you bring that up, see how deeply you understand, what we're trying to do, that motivates me, that excites me, it inspires me, it reminds me of conversations that we had where, I walk away and I'm fired up. It's wonderful. I'm so glad that you understand a lot of these different values that we're bringing to what we're doing with the HDLI and what you're bringing to the Stringed Instrument Roadshow. These are very important points. We talked about like, hey man, get your face on your website. People want to know who you are. They want to know about you. This is a good step in that direction. This is also a great opportunity for people to see me without a mask on. So it's kind of this fun opportunity to be able to do this. Another thing you touched on is how the Healdsburg show, it's gone. The Healdsburg show was a tremendous inspiration for the HDLI in that it was a gathering of luthiers in a setting where it was basically only that. There was luthiers and then there was LMI. Basically, they built out a store in the hotel where they held the Healdsburg show. And it was such an amazing opportunity. There was musicians there, but more importantly, it was packed with luthiers. Luthiers talking luthery. And it was so inspiring at times. Sometimes it was really disappointing. You get to meet your heroes and you find out that they're regular people with regular struggles, regular flaws, and sometimes you meet your heroes on a good day and sometimes you meet them on a really bad day. And I definitely had those experiences there. And I had some wonderful experiences there. And in, looking at that, the cover was really high to get in. Like, just for a show where if you're not going in there to look at everything in awe, I would go over there to hit up the LMI store and say hi to a bunch of friends and, to pay like, I think it was like $35 to get in and look around for 45 minutes. I felt like it was a little steep at the time, especially when I went with friends, and I had invited them, and maybe, I'm going to pay the cover for everybody or something like that, and my friends are going to buy me lunch or whatever, whatever the situation was. I remember the last time I went, I was like, wow. This is a little steep. And what I remember as well, wanting to exhibit there, and I never did, it was a really steep entry fee as well. So when we put our show together, The show came together also out of another show that we had out here where the guy who ran that show, he took off with everybody's money a month before go time. And I'm not one to like throw in the towel for a whole lot, especially in the face of somebody just kind of pulled the wool over all of our eyes. And now what? I'm not going to throw my hands up. And so I just started driving around town asking people for space. And eventually one of the luthiers who was also a part of that show, reached out and said, hey, you might want to start looking at breweries, try these places. It was a great suggestion, and we found a spot, and we've stayed at that spot. And I tell you all of this to get to the point. The Hillsburg show was a great big part of my inspiration. The biggest part that I pulled away from Hillsburg was meeting Bob Benedetto. And I learned recently from Richard Hoover, the boss over at SCGC, very good friend of mine, that Bob and his wife ran that show. And I had a really poor interaction with somebody I really looked up to. I'm not going to name any names. And Bob saw this happening, and he came over and he put his hand on my shoulder and he took me for a walk, and he just spent a lot of time at a show where everybody wanted to talk to him. And for those of you that don't know, we haven't done an interview with me. The inspiration for me getting into making guitars is really it's kind of weird. I make mainly electric guitars. I make some acoustic guitars now and then. My biggest inspirations based on the books that I collected were Richard Hoover and Bob Benedetto. And at the time I worked for Richard, I was extremely close with Richard, and that was like a big thing for me. When Richard walked in the door, every day, it felt like, oh shit, my hero's here. And there's all these feelings that go through there where I was afraid to talk to him. I was afraid that I was going to fuck up and, make a fool of myself. And I'm sure I did many times. I was very young when I worked in that shop and very immature. uh, you
So
know,
was I.
yeah, and a lot of us can relate to that. And so, like, getting to meet Bob under these circumstances, it really inspired me. And I thought, well, okay, if we're going to put our own show together, as a recovery, I don't have better words. I can be a little crass, but somebody fucked us over pretty good, right? This whole Luthiery community out here in Albuquerque. And let's do this as a makeup show. Let's do this for free. And you know what? Let's go a step further. This venue, Rio Bravo Brewing, out here in Albuquerque, they said, how could we help you? What do you need? You can have all this space here. Well, okay, well, what's that going to cost us? Nothing. We're here to help you. Holy shit. That's amazing. They offered us all this space and said, you guys can have the space. We're here for you. And thank you. Again, I can't thank them enough for coming through it. And they've remained the home of the HDLI. But to have that kind of support, we turned around and said, we're not charging anybody for any of this. We put this show together with the idea of changing the way that these sort of events take place. They can cost money, right? I mean, you think about all the investment that the artists have in their product. Some of them coming from out of state. It's not cheap, it's not easy. We all kind of have our own trials and tribulations, struggles with getting projects done by a deadline, getting them out here safely, all of that stuff, right? And so that already is an immense investment. Like, why take anybody's money is how I felt. Like, let's just get everybody here, get everybody excited, really change that vibe of, oh man, if I don't make any money, I'm going to be out like so much money, you know, like let's just change it to like, let's just have a good time. Let's show a lot of support, as in, Allison and I, and especially Allison on the Instagram, we're pumping everybody a part of the HDLI as much as we can throughout the year. We tell everyone, in between shows, there's 6 months in between every show. Like, send us anything you're doing and we will help promote you. It's turned into the local musicians are finally learning that they can rely on us to spread the word about what they're doing. And there's some really cool collaborations that are happening now. And these people haven't even played in any of the shows. They're just local musicians that come out to all of the shows. And the feedback we were getting finally, after about 2 years of doing this, is that we have been the glue of building this community up, really connecting all the luthiers together, but also connecting the musicians with the luthiers. And, people pointed out, and this is another thing that you brought up that I wanted to touch on, that there's no solid way to find out of anything that's happening, right? And I don't think there ever was. I mean, there was a time, back 15, 20 years ago when you could pull the weekly out and find out what bands were playing where pretty reliably,
Right.
but even then, there were other venues that we didn't know about, other things happening. Maybe there was an ad in the weekly for like the Central Coast Guitar Show down in Santa Barbara or somewhere around there. That show still happens, but it's more of like it's open to buy, sell, and trade, and it turns into a flea market pretty quick.
Kind of like the Amigo show.
Yeah, and so, also having that in mind, I don't want that. And I'm not saying those sort of things aren't okay, but, when we look at luthiers, it tends to be this boutique world, right? Like that's kind of the terminology that comes up in the magazines and in the forums. And, there's always going to be somebody that doesn't like it or doesn't agree. It doesn't matter the skill set, it's all about the intention,
Right.
right? And
Right.
because the
Yep.
skill set is constantly changing if you're in this creative growth,
Right.
constantly. And it's just a constant evolution of an artist, of a craftsperson, and so we thought, well, yeah, let's keep this really pure. It doesn't matter if it's a small show, doesn't matter if it's a really big show. Our second show, we had about 44 different makers and live music and bloody hot weather. And, you were part of the Great Weight Cut that day. It was pretty
I was
intense.
going to say I was there for that one, if I
Yep,
remember correctly.
yep, you were there.
It wasn't as hot as I thought it was going to be. Full disclosure.
I was hurting really bad. I used to try and catch up with everybody after the show and kind of see, how their experience was. And I found that for me, in the beginning, it was helpful. And then it became stressful. People will tell me, like, hey, I just had a knee surgery or something. Can you put me next to the door? I was like, well, I'll tell you what, we'll have people ready to help you. I kind of want to be there for everyone the best that I can. And so I had to stop asking people about their experience. And I decided to do that this show because otherwise I'm trying to make these moves and rearrange everything. We curate the whole show. So who is next to who is important to us. Somebody complains about something, you're just going to move them or whatever. It just gets impossible. It gets very stressful for me personally. And I decided, hey, I'm not going to touch base. The next thing you're going to hear from me is your invitation to be a part of the next show.
Hey, do you mind if I jump in on that?
Tell us about the Stringed Instrument Roadshow.
So, everything that we've talked about already, right? The adoption of the vision of HDLI, that community building, getting small shop builders a chance to gather and making it free. It doesn't have to, be a cost. One of the things that I came away from my HDLI show, where I was an exhibitor, and talking with the guy that I was sharing a table with, came home and realized, like what you mentioned earlier, about there's a cost to go into any kind of stuff. My table mate was telling me about, he's been to other shows, and what do you get out of the expense of it? And you and I have talked about, like, what is a small shop builder getting out of it, the expense of having a table at NAM, which is basically an invitation to empty out your pockets and sit in a building next to a building. I'm not trying to throw shade on what NAM's doing, because it's the world show, right? It's like Disney World. You can't fit it all in one day anyway. but it's still got to be there. Started kind of doing some number crunching. The cost for me to go to anything on the other side of the Rockies, I can't recover the cost in sales in that year. And look behind me, this is just what I've done so far this year, and it's about half of what I'm going to end up finishing, which for a small shop guy, that's a pretty sizable handful. I know a lot of guys who build 6 instruments a year. Maybe they charge a little bit more, but uh, but the point being, it's hard to recover your costs as a small builder and travel a lot. And like you said, the cost of moving instruments and the risk you run of flying with them, shipping them, whatever, is really high. No, we need something like this in Santa Cruz, or at least in California for sure. That is not a flea market, or bring out your vintage Stratocaster and try and hawk it for top dollar. It's more like handcrafted, people that build stuff, and hey, violin makers, mandolin makers, you name it. Like if it's got strings on it, you should come out, share with the people around you what you do. The part of it that I kind of came away with is that besides it being necessary and needed locally where I'm at, and that's an easy lift for me to take that on, I really kind of started going with the idea of like, this needs to happen regionally, and it needs to happen in a cohesive way, because that lowers the bar to entry. And I know through talking with you about putting together a stringed instrument roadshow that you have other people reaching out about wanting to do regional shows. I talked with some guys in Utah, and everybody's doing it a little different, and that's always cool. But sometimes maybe it's helpful to kind of like gather around a central theme. Like I'm gathering around your central theme of like, bring it into local community, make it accessible, and then do it again. you know like don't just one off it. So that's kind of the long vision. Like I've really been trying to document my process of putting the stringed instrument roadshow together, and doing it so in a way to where, like, if somebody said I want to put on a show, I'm like, all right, I got a plan for you. Find a venue, and then find some exhibitors, and then put one on. Because finding a venue and finding the exhibitors is hard enough, let alone if you've never put on an event before. And I've been doing some stuff with Scotts Valley Art, Wine, and Beer Festival for about 6 years now. So kind of really being involved with a good sized event. I think we had 22,000 people through in a weekend last year. So, it's a pretty epic deal. Really gives me a lot of insight on, like, hey, your infrastructure is really important, and I'm super impressed at how well HDLI went when I attended, and it's just you and Allison doing it. Like, it was super impressive. So I do have a business partner. Her name's Judith. Her and I are both ambassadors on the Scotts Valley Chamber of Commerce. And last year, kind of last minute, I had to jump in and take over the volunteer chair for the Art, Wine, and Beer Festival. And she was somebody that I was like immediately thought of, like, I want to bring her on board to help me out with this. She's got good organizational skills, good communication skills, and really cares. Through our experience talking together, I was like, oh, I got to bring her in on Stringed Instrument Roadshow because she loves music. She's done shows in the past, and she's just a sweetheart of a person and somebody I want to work with. So we're at the point where I'm starting to try to reach out and get exhibitors. So anybody watching, you want to be part of Stringed Instrument Roadshow, either go to the website, stringedinstrumentroadshow.com. There's an application right on the website. You can fill it out and we'll take a look at what you got, or DM me on Instagram at Stringed Instrument Roadshow. And that's kind of where we're at, and that's kind of the vision moving forward. So probably be a once a year show. I think there's enough other things going on. Anyways, point being, keep it regional, make it accessible, make it a format that is comfortable and invites people in, and then you can kind of focus on your community building instead of trying to figure out how to run a show. You can reach out to your chamber of commerce. You can reach out to some of your local event nonprofits that are pumping up everything that's going on. So that's the Stringed Instrument Roadshow part that you asked the question about, what we are, where we're going. But the thing that you got me thinking about in this is that and I'm going to throw this out. Maybe you and I try and host like a Zoom focus group, not really a focus group, but just a Zoom meetup on the in-between times in between HDLI, get a few other builders in, or maybe even a few other event promoters, and just kind of chop it up for a half hour and put it on our podcasts. Just have content to share ideas. Just thought.
That sounds like it could be a good thing, and I've only barely started to loosen the reins on the things that I'm doing. Allison was with me from day one for the HDLI, and I only, recently said, hey, like, you're doing a great job with this. It's obvious I don't have the time in my day or the interest to be posting like you're doing. So just take this over. I talked to, a few other people doing shows, wanting to put shows together, and there were some really good pointers. And, we'll kind of pass pointers that we figure out. Like one of the guys up in Utah, sent me a message. Hey, we just figured out that electronic billboards out here are like $80 a year. And, I was like, holy shit, I can beg that. Like, that's pretty reasonable. A lot of people aren't clear on, aside from Rio Bravo Brewing giving us the space, Allison and I are responsible for all the financial end. And, we're not wealthy. We're not well off. We're struggling just like most everyone else is. And, I made 2 guitars a year for the past year, and those are my raffle guitars. And, we're not getting rich off of that, but it's another opportunity to get some new guitars out into the world and start to like spread the word about this show. The raffle guitars are wonderful. When you're a luthier and, you grow up around other luthiers, there's no rules to what you charge for anything that you're doing. There's no guidelines. You just see what your friends are doing and you have feelings about it, but nobody really talks about it.
You see what your friends are doing and you have feelings about it. You need a t-shirt for that, Perry.
And nobody talks about it though.
You and I talk about it a lot.
Yeah, we do. And what you'll hear from me now is, whatever you're thinking, consider that you could probably ask more for that and, be in a place where you're happy that you sold this instrument regardless of how you felt about it and that it really helped you, especially if this is how you're paying the bills. Taking a loss on selling an instrument that you put a lot of time into is a very good way to have a lot of people questioning you, people that mean something to you or close to you, questioning you about, hey, are you sure? Like you're, like really uncomfortable conversations, rather than celebrating your success. And it's a tough place to be because this whole market doesn't really train us to have that sort of confidence. And I'm not saying like be a narcissist and delusional, but to have the confidence in yourself to ask for what you want and not be willing to budge from that. You don't go into an art gallery and say, hey, I see that $5,000 price tag. I'll give you $30. You just don't do that. It's not in the culture. I spent some time working at a local wood shop and I'm not there anymore. I got to meet a lot of luthiers there, a lot of new luthiers, especially since we started doing these shows and inspiring people. A lot of older luthiers, woodworkers, players. People would come in surprisingly looking for a place to get their instruments repaired. I was like, oh wow, that's an interesting, like chain of thought. Like, okay, cool. And, because I'm in the place that I am with organizing this event, yeah, go see these guys. But somebody said, yeah, oh yeah, I saw your guitars there at the show and I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. And they're way too expensive. And, the reaction in me, because now I've been triggered, the Aries in me says to you, right? The
Right.
little devil on my shoulder is going to you. And I pause, take a breath, and, oh, Okay, that's interesting. So my question to you was, did you see anything that excited you at the show? And that's an interesting walkaway. You know, you had a show with 30 different artists, a ton of stuff to look at. To be honest with you, it's very overwhelming. I remember the Hillsburg show being very overwhelming. The art, the craftsmanship, oh God, it's just so much to take in.
Sure.
Uh, so I was sort of thinking that, like, okay, well, what else do I need to do to help shift this train of thought? It's like, okay, this is just simply part of a cultural trance. How can we help once again shift that paradigm, shift that way of thinking into a place of appreciation? And you can't do it for everybody. It's just not going to happen. But, talking about it now, I think is a step in the right direction in opening this conversation up to other people. My biggest fear, to bring it back home, is getting that sort of criticism on, you guys need to do this, you guys need to do that, without even understanding everything that we are working to do, not understanding the outside circumstances. Getting those conversations to stay in a productive and supportive lane is a hard thing. And for me personally, I have a hard time dealing with that emotionally, and I choose to not participate. But I do keep in contact with a lot of people and tend to talk one on one. I feel like for my attention span, it's more suitable that way. But I wouldn't mind listening in.
We'll start with a offline support group first, and then and then we'll see. I don't mind taking point on something like that either. There's more people reaching out to you right now than are reaching out to me. So reach out if you think you got an interest in putting on a show. I'm happy to talk with people about it. I know you're happy to talk with them about it too. So at least two people who care about the fact that we don't do enough community in Luthiery to keep us all inspired and excited about, like, damn, we love making instruments. And there's a point where you can only make so many and you run out of space. And then either your dog or your significant other says, like, oh, where am I supposed to sit? And you got to start selling stuff. And then you're inevitably a businessman now. And maybe you're not prepared for it. And maybe you don't have thoughts about it, or maybe you don't know what to do. But if there's a community, there's people who do, and they're happy to talk to you about it because by and large, most luthiers, and you bring up Richard, the late Rick Turner, all these old heads, they all love talking about it. And most of them won't turn you away. They'll be like, oh, you're interested? That's great. Well, have a seat. Let's talk. And, we're the next ones up to kind of keep that going on. If nobody talks about who's going to carry the torch, it's going to extinguish. And I think you're one of those torch bearers. And what you're doing with HDLI is, like I said, inspirational enough to like cause a show to happen in Scotts Valley in September this year.
Awesome. Yeah, and we can get together. We can, reach out to the Utah guys and get together with them after their show. Give them the opportunity to talk about what went right and what they want to adjust. Being able to learn from different shows and head into your first show. And then there's another cat out in DC trying to put something together and, is in the early stages of cooking up these ideas, but had the fortitude to reach out and say, hey, this is amazing what you're doing all the way in DC. Like, that blows my mind. And, reach out, and I'm a real person. I'll respond. It was great to have that conversation and just even learn that I'm inspiring anybody. I never thought that I would be doing this. I thought I'd just be making guitars, until I wasn't. And this is so fulfilling. Putting the HDLI together, running all this, it just leaves me, I'm not itching to get back into my shop. I'm trying to figure out, how to book the next show, who the new people are going to be, where am I going to meet those people? Just how are we going to keep everybody else on board? Because that's another really, tricky thing is you might get a bunch of locals for your first show and you go to get all those same locals and some of them have had a change of heart. Some of them have life stuff happening, and some of them are just flaky. Like, I'll be honest. And you have to really learn how to have boundaries around that. And, I try and communicate the best that I can with anybody, out of state, local, especially if that lane is open, because some people have just ghosted me.
Yeah.
You roll with the punches in these instances. There's nothing you can do about it. It's not a me thing, it's a them thing. And,
Yeah.
I hope that somewhere down the line, if any of the people that have ghosted me, hear this, that they know they could always reach back out and say, hey, I made a mistake, whatever, and I'd be open to talking about it. So, with your show, what are some of the challenges that you've come across or that you've been working through in putting it together, in making it happen, in finding luthiers to participate? Like, can you talk about some of that?
I chose to take the path of putting some kind of foundational something to point to before I started really doing strong outreach and curation. Some of that was Judith and I, getting some alignment together about what it is we kind of want to make sure of. And one of the things, interestingly enough, is you bring up the flaky factor. We did want to keep free to exhibitors and free to attendees. So for us, that meant a sponsorship model because we first started looking at a place that maybe there's some space that would hold that. And I coordinate beer vendors for the Art, Wine, and Beer Festival. So I reached out to a few breweries and, it was kind of like, yeah, we got a parking lot that we could use. And I looked into that a little bit and it just really didn't seem like the kind of environment that I really wanted to ask luthiers to kind of come to, just a parking lot and bring a tent kind of thing. So we ended up settling on picking a indoor space. So that way we can go late fall. If weather changes weird, we're fine. We don't have to cancel the event. And again, like we're going to take a sponsorship model approach to help offset the costs. We're trying to raise money for going to a premium venue and spots going forward. We'd like to be down at the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk one year, but that venue is not cheap, but it's a great location. It's beautiful, plenty of parking. The spot that we have, we're going to be at the Scotts Valley Community Center. It's beautiful there, plenty of parking. It's convenient enough for people coming from different areas. But one of the things that we instituted about the keeping it free to exhibitors, we are doing our participation guarantee fee. Basically, once you get accepted, we're going to charge you $50 and you'll get it back if you show up. And then there's a cancellation date that if you cancel by that, you'll get it back. We want you to be free, but you got to show up to do that. I mean, obviously, there might be extenuating circumstances, but we'll deal with those case by case. But we kind of decided, like, they always talk about people having skin in the game, right? Like, if you've ever bought a house, like, you got to put a deposit down. And, if you don't buy the house, you get your deposit back. If you buy the house, it goes towards the price. But you got to have skin in the game. Otherwise, people won't take it seriously that you're going to participate. So that was one of the things I learned from you that I was like, maybe we should put some effort in it. And maybe it might shorten the list of people that say, well, that's stupid. Or, I might get like, oh, why are you charging that? I'm like, look, man, you got to do what you got to do. The goal is to protect the community. And if you can't get on board, you don't really want to be part of the community. And that's okay. That's your choice. But I'm going to put up some guardrails. I'm going to try and make this thing continue to happen and keep the community growing. That's like, hey, you don't go to a potluck and not bring anything. So, hey, if you show up, it's free.
That's pretty amazing. And I'm sure you'll find that a lot of these people will just pass you that $50 bill back and say, hey, just keep it for everything that you're doing. But yeah, what are some challenges that you've been running into?
I think I'm going to say we kind of haven't really run into a ton of challenges yet. And I'm going to chalk that up to two things. One, most of it's been largely admin and getting something in place. I've launched a couple of startups. I've worked with festivals, like the experiential part of like how to lay a foundation. I kind of brought that to the table anyways. So feeling pretty good about all that part. Now it's trying to get people to actually fill out the application when they say, yeah, I definitely want to participate. And, I've got some verbals from some people, and that's great. But now that the website's at a spot where like there's room to put your information on there, I need you to do the application. And, like I said, it's been a very small reach out effort at this point, but I'll be ramping that up. You can reach out at stringedinstrumentroadshow.com or at Stringed Instrument Roadshow on Instagram because I'm a real person too, and I will get back to you.
And there's another thing that's changed, over time is we send out this really thorough email about all the guidelines and all the do's and the don'ts, and we hold people accountable. Because at the end of the day, to put on something for free, it's a lot of work, and we really have to depend on everyone participating, right? And one of the luthiers kind of reached out and was like, "Hey, man, I don't know how I feel about being called a vendor." And he was kind of joking, but he was kind of not. And, it's turned into participants because everyone's participating. In a show where you're paying a cover to participate, you're not given really any clear direction sometimes. And you show up and you're just like, all right, let's see what happens. I feel like it doesn't start things off on the right foot, and in getting people to engage and ask questions and be comfortable. I feel like setting those boundaries, those rules, having it be very clear is very helpful, at least for me, because then I know that, hey, I already sent you all this stuff. If I have to tell you again, then I'm going to really consider not having you participate again. Like some of these things, they end up being redundant because it's the nature of the beast. But when you have that there for people to reference, it goes a long way in helping, put the whole thing together. And like I said before, Allison and I run this whole show. We don't have the scratch to be paying, a staff to be able to delegate all of these things out. We're scrambling to help everyone to their spaces and also get our booth set up for Unga guitars and also run the stage because we have live music. Are you guys going to do music for your show?
We have a spot for music. There's an outside patio. We're gonna have outside tables. We're gonna have a food truck. One of the local breweries is one of our sponsors. They're gonna pour a beer there. No food and drink inside where the exhibitors are. We're just not even gonna deal with that. Fortunately, the alcohol permit says no alcohol indoors, so it'll all be outside. Our event's only going to be 12 to 4. It's a pretty short window deal, so it's really only going to be two sets. Got a couple of options for sure. We're not lacking musicians around here, much like you
Right?
guys.
There's so many wonderful musicians out here. What I will, recommend is try and get some good video and some really good quality audio at the very least. There seems to be this thing that's happened. When I was a musician, social media wasn't huge, and getting live recordings wasn't really a thing that I was into. And now we all have cameras on our phones and whatnot, but what happens is you get to see the performance, but you can't hear it because it's just a clipped out microphone, and you're only getting, whatever the microphone can struggle to pick up. And Allison and I picked up this Shure mic that plugs into your phone,
Uh-huh.
and I mean, the increase in quality of the sound is so good. I mean, it's amazing. Like, we did kind of like night and day tests with the mic and without the mic, and it was just like, wow. And so a lot of the audio that we got from the last show was using that microphone, and, $200, and, not a huge investment, not cheap, but not a huge investment, and well worth it for getting the audio quality up to snuff. And, lead by example. Now we have it out there. Now people can see how it's working. They can hear how it's working, because otherwise it's a bunch of social media posts with really shitty audio, and I can't gauge that. Like, I can't figure out, okay, what am I hearing? What am I not hearing?
Right.
And to be clear, I'm trying to figure out, just in making plans easier for out of town people, because we have a great deal of out of town folks that participate in our show, figure out the sort of more ideal place to stay, to recommend. And so I'll get some feedback later on where you stood. And it wasn't too far from the venue and all of that, but I'm going to be sending some feelers out. And, if anything, we'll put together a list. There's all of these sort of like dream ideas that I have for the HDLI, but it's Some of it's just fantasy, and some of it, we can make happen little by little. The first show we did, this lady came through and she walked through and she was just enjoying the whole thing, and she didn't know that Allison and I were running the show, and she just came over and was like, "This is so cool." Like I just came here for lunch and I just took a stroll through here and I've been in here for, over an hour, and it's like an art show. It's like I'm at an art walk, and this is so amazing. Like whoever put this together, this is a really fun idea. I was like, "Oh, cool, that was me." And Allison did it. She's like, "Oh, really? Wow, this is great. I'd look forward to checking this out again." Like, I don't even like guitars, and this is a really fun thing. And we've been getting more and more feedback, and we've been seeing more and more husband and wife or partners, come out to support each other for the day. And it's really cool to see that because, like, one thing at the Hillsborough show was it was only the makers there, mostly that I noticed. And if there were anybody's wives or partners there, I didn't notice that sort of thing happen a whole lot. And I think it's great to turn it into a family affair. Some people brought their whole families, and, it really changes the atmosphere from the old school pissing contest. We're just going to play guitar for our lives and judge everyone, to more of that family affair. Let's focus on love and appreciation for the day.
I like it.
When is your show, Tobin?
Our show is September 20th, 2025 in Scotts Valley, California. And again, all that information, as if I haven't plugged in enough, is on stringedinstrumentroadshow.com and or at Stringed Instrument Roadshow on Instagram. We also have a Facebook page too. And guess what? It's Stringed Instrument Roadshow.
Very consistent. Do you have any idea of how many spaces you're trying to fill?
Got room for 40. That's what we're shooting for.
All right. Room for
So,
40. So
yeah,
all of you Bay Area, Central Coast, Monterey County,
Oregon, Seattle.
West Coast, get out there. Give it a shot. If you haven't got the hint yet in listening to this interview, both Tobin and I are very approachable, very nice, caring people, and we'll give you the time. If you've experienced otherwise, in trying to do work in this industry,
Comments
very,
below.
yeah, very sorry. But we're trying to make sure to change. Both Tobin and I, we're really trying to, help change these sort of things and be as supportive as we can. You got anything for me before we sign
Yeah,
off?
I got to tell you this story. When you were talking about Richard and coming in, your hero, nervous to talk to. So I worked for Richard as well. And honestly didn't know really much about guitars in the sense of an industry, whatnot, who the players are. I was a young guy, 22 years old, had Navy experience, some junior high school wood shop. And before I went in the Navy, my neighbor was like, "Oh, hey, I'm a great guitar player." And he was, and tried to teach me a little bit. So, I had this like really low level interest in playing guitar, but realized in the Navy, like maybe I should go work in the music industry because the Navy is not my cup of tea. So I get a chance to interview at Santa Cruz Guitar Company. And I'm taking this serious because I had called and they had said, "Well, we're full right now, but you know, we like people who have, interest and maybe not a lot of experience. We want to teach our way." And the shop foreman at the time was a Coast Guard veteran. And so he's like, "Oh yeah, like I like the idea that you got some military, you're teachable. You'll do what you're told." So they said, keep calling back. So 6 months later, I finally get an interview. And I'm like, I gotta nail this. So I go out and I buy a button-up shirt and a nice jacket and put on a tie. And I go walking into Santa Cruz Guitar Company, and you worked there, so you know what I'm saying without saying it. And I do my interview with Richard. My time with the company came and went. I parted ways. And years later, Richard's at an event that I'm at. It's like like a barbecue or something like that. And we're talking, and he goes, "So I got to tell you something. When you came in and interviewed, like nobody had ever showed up to interview with a tie." He's on, "You made me really nervous." And I
Oh,
laughed because I'm like, I'm 23 years old. Richard's this, established icon in the industry. If I had known more about it, I would have been even more awed. Like I'm thinking about when David Crosby comes by the shop, the first like big celebrity that came through when I was working there. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm talking to David Crosby. He's like, oh, dude, I can't believe I'm talking to the guy who's working on my guitar. But yeah, so I thought I'd share that with you that there were actually people that made him nervous when they talked to him as well.
oh man, that's wonderful. I got to do an interview with Richard and I lost the interview on the Zoom and I'm hoping to reschedule something with him. It's such an honor, really, that he's even willing to spend the time and, talk about these things. Richard is a regular person. He breathes air and he cares and has, feelings just like all of us. And it's so nice to be able to shoot the shit with him now and then. And I had this really interesting experience where I left the shop. We parted ways, and Richard wasn't there, and kind of left each other hanging. I've been thinking about this a lot, right? So we were never friends. We were always boss and worker, but the relationship was so strong. You could rely on him. And, some of the people that are still there, because there's a lot of people who have been in that shop for decades, they might disagree because they're still really too close to it, but hindsight, it's always going to be clearer. And he did such an amazing job of not muddying the waters, and being as loving and supportive as he could at that time. And the day before Allison and I left California for New Mexico, we ran into him at a gas station. And, I hadn't talked to him. I had all these feelings, hurt, resentment, betrayal. And he just came right over and he gave me the biggest hug, both crying. And it just put it into perspective. I miss you so much. That's the first thing I told him. And to have my hero just lead by example, I knew, oh my God, like, this is why I look up to him so much, so inspired by him. And first thing he said was, I should have been better to you. And, we could have been better to each other, but we're here now. And wow, thank you. So much healing in that moment. But having that closure with my hero, it just went so far. It's been so inspiring and, forever grateful for that. All of these legends in the industry are getting older. And so to be able to spend any amount of time or even just appreciate their art, them as people, we got to get on that, do that as much as possible. And also appreciate the artists around us
I
putting these
was
shows
just going to say
together.
that. It's
Us,
appreciating each other too.
yep, we put these
That
shows together.
same reverence,
Yeah.
it's important now. It's important now too. That care is important to us. We're creators, we're artists. We're not the kind of people that do well without a little bit of love and attention.
Yeah. Right after this, I'm going to take a walk down the street to Albuquerque Community College and CNM is what it's called. They're having a artists fair where all the students are showing off their work, and a lot of them are customers that I got to help on all these different projects, and I never got to go out and support them at their shows because I could never get the time off. And now I have a lot more time on my hands, and I thought, what better way to show support and spend my afternoons and supporting other local artists and trying to be that inspiring person that like Richard and Rick Turner were for me. And these are just the legends that were in Santa Cruz. And I mean, even Jeff Traugott and Scott Walker and Steve Stram and
He's going to be at the show.
yeah, and there's so many names. Willie Carter, who spent some time in Santa Cruz, Eric Paulson, all homies, right? Like,
Right.
it's just getting to spend time with those guys, as much or as little. It was all wonderful.
Yeah. We don't want to forget good old Adam Stark either.
That's right. You can't forget Adam Stark. Yeah, and how welcoming all of those people were, and still how friendly and welcoming they are. They're real people. It's amazing. And if you know enough people too, if you can't get through, you can always reach out to somebody else and say, "Hey, can you tell him to call me back, please?"
Right, right. Hey, I have a couple questions I want to ask. The big one is like looking ahead, where do you see HDLI heading in the next few years?
That's a great question. I really, really love this venue we're at, and I hope that never changes. If it never changes, that means that we've been doing it right. That means that everything's been working out for them, for their business. I mean, wouldn't that be amazing, right? Like if 20 years from now we were still doing this there, all the same way, like that would be an amazing feat. Like in these times, we see so many businesses start up, a couple years later they're gone, and then that building's filled up by the next business, and a couple years later they're gone. And I mean, it would be so amazing if we're both still doing what we're doing now 20 years later. I think, that's a big goal of mine, is how can we keep this rolling nonstop, 2 shows a year? How can we grow this to be, even more? Like, I'd love to be able to have a hotel that, like a nice one out here that, was like, yeah, we'll, give you guys a group discount for everyone to stay here and have a shuttle that can pick everyone up and take them to the show. I think that'd be really cool. I want to like give people that superstar experience. I want to let everyone know that I love and appreciate them. I think they're all rock stars, superstars, however you want to say it. Like, I think that would be so cool. But these are things that require money. And like I said, Allison and I are the ones that handle all of that stuff. And if not, it's still a fantasy of mine. I'd love to be able to have meal vouchers for everyone as well and make sure that everyone gets to eat and drink something fun for the day. I want this experience to be amazing. I got to see a couple of people come to the show. One of them, it was their first show, and he had a blast.
And his name was Tobin.
It was Tobin. Yeah, right.
That was totally a description of my HDLI experience.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for that. I'm glad that we could provide that opportunity. But, it's keep this going. That's my biggest goal.
Yeah, and then I guess if somebody was on the fence about joining HDLI, or for that matter, String Instrument Roadshow, what would you say to them?
So, any of these shows, the Utah Guitar Exhibition, whatever's cooking up anywhere else, Stringed Instrument Roadshow, Pie Desert Luthiery Invitational. If you're on the fence, rip the Band-Aid. Like, I'm an Aries, right? So I'm gonna be pretty after it. And, we talked about getting people to reach out and want to participate or fill out the form. I get after people. I will bug you until you respond. And then I make sure to be very clear. And then I'll even send a follow up email and a text message making sure that you understand what I need. And it's really simple. So we call it the invitational, and everyone has to go through me. I invite everybody and I interview everybody who's in the show. And before we give the green light, Allison and I sit down and we go through your website, your social media. And what we're looking for is that you're not an undercover asshole or a creep or anything like that. Anything that is outside of this culture of love and support, it's really not accepted to me. And that would be a barrier to entry, right? That's going to be a hard no for me. It doesn't matter how you conduct yourself while I'm talking to you on the phone or in a Zoom meeting. That's going to be a deal breaker for me. And in some cases, we'll give people a second chance, but mm, it's it's a tricky situation. So for people who are hesitant, who think they're not ready, guess what you are? When you get that phone call from me or that email saying, "Hey, consider this a soft invite, give me a call," that means I think you're ready. Well, who am I to say that? Well, I don't think I'm anybody important. I have a lot of experience in guitar making, in working with people. More importantly, what I'm leading with is appreciation for what you're doing as an artist. And if it's not clear, if you haven't read the mission statement on my website, if you haven't seen any of the interviews that we've done, I'm coming from a place of complete love and appreciation. I am here to listen and support, and I am not here to make money off of anybody. What I'm here to do is give everyone a shot at the title. Like the title of what? What is that title? Success, happiness. Like, what does success mean? Have a great day at a really cool show and meet a lot of really cool people. Like, that's a very successful show for me. I don't know, participate in one of the many raffles that happen at the show and hopefully win something. If you're not on the fence about visiting, right? You don't have to be on the fence about being an exhibitor, being a participant, having your own table. Yeah, you know what? It can feel kind of frustrating that maybe you're locked down to the table. Guess what? There's breaks in the day, even on a 4-hour show. There's plenty of opportunities to walk around. When you put a show together, so when I do this, and when Tobin does this, and when the Utah Guitar Exhibition does this is a bunch of people that have curated another group of people that we somewhat know, that we like, and we trust. And what that does is it builds this community where we can all trust one another. So if I'm going to walk away to go to the restroom, I can count on my homie next to me to watch over my stuff. But more importantly, I don't even have to do that because of the community that we've created, right? And it's wonderful. So, this is me talking about my show. If you're on the fence about participating, rip that band-aid off. Give me a call. My phone number is all over the place. Like, give Tobin a call. Reach out to him. Get that conversation started. Sometimes these first steps are the hardest ones, but with practice, they get easier. I swear you're not going to regret it. No one's going to tell you that you're not ready for this or anything like that. We have first time builders coming out with their first instruments. We have people bringing work in progress because how else is anyone going to even believe that some of us do some of the things? Every show I'm like, how did you even do that? Wow, that's amazing. Wow, time to go back to the drawing board, and build these skills even more. Like, I'm feeling very inspired. I hope after listening to this interview, and I want you all to know, like, this wasn't scripted. When I do the HDLI interviews, there's sort of a script that I follow. I send out a bunch of questions, and I spaced this interview this morning. I was sanding, and Tobin and I had been going back and forth. So, I mean, we stay in regular contact as friends, and I totally spaced it. And so we're just winging it. And you can do that, and it's totally cool. When we do these shows, we wing it. I don't have expectations other than everybody, follow the guidelines and have fun. If that's not enough to get people who are unsure about participating, then, I don't know what it takes, but the community definitely does come through in aiding with that and hopefully helping everyone feel supported.
I just really appreciate you, Perry. I know you like to say, like, who am I to say? And you know what? Maybe this is just me fanboying out, but you might be the single most influential person in small shop Luthiery show world right now.
Well, thank you. That means the world to me.
Everybody's calling you.
Yeah, in a moment of complete honesty and vulnerability, I had a hard time accepting thank you from people. It wasn't in my upbringing, and like expressing gratitude wasn't really in my upbringing. And doing this show, putting the HDLI together, and also being in therapy and trying to better myself, kind of correct bad habits, it has been such an amazing practice in gratitude, in being thankful, grateful for all of the people I've met, all of the people I'm going to meet, and all of my friends that have showed so much support. So thank you too. People say thank you to me, and that I'm inspiring, and I'm getting choked up right now. But I feel the same way towards you. Whenever there's something really cool happening in the shop, you're the first person I call. There's only so much that Allison's going to get excited about.
Oh man.
And so you're the first person that I call.
We got connected through tech people.
That's right. That's right. Through friends in common. Yeah.
Yeah. Not even
Yeah.
luthiers, not even woodworkers,
Yeah.
tech
Yeah.
people.
And I'm forever grateful to Jason and Nadine for getting us together, you and I, Tobin, like, because this has been a wonderful friendship.
It
Yeah.
really has. And yeah, somber note. But thank you once again. And I'm really glad to be that excited person that you call when something new happens in the shop, because I do get excited when you call with new stuff and new ideas. I think that's been maybe a hallmark of our friendship, of just like the things that we've nerded out on, the things that we've just completely, deep dived off of the railroad bridge into the worst part of the river and went, yeah, look, we didn't die.
Yeah, and I will say we're going to have to do a separate interview so we can talk about those guitars right behind you, which are the fruits of those conversations. And I'd say they're very polarizing. They make you feel something, or at least for me, I feel something looking at them because we've talked about this so much, right? So I'm
Right.
inside, but for the people outside, too, I'd imagine they're just bringing up questions like we haven't even touched on that. So, a little cliffhanger. We'll have to schedule that chat real soon. And
Sweet.
hopefully, as you get your Stringed Instrument Roadshow podcast rolling, we can continue to both record this and share this and edit it however we're going to edit it and, be true to our brands,
Yeah.
and really help build our communities, and show love and support for one another. But thank you for doing this, Tobin. This was your idea. Thank you for pushing me to get the cobwebs off of the podcast and move forward with this. It's perfect timing. Perfect
Yeah.
timing. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. If anything, we do push each other to keep going, don't we?
We certainly do.
All right, Perry. Well, much love to you, and much love to Allison, and thanks for everything you guys do for the guitar community.
Right on. Take care, Tobin.
All right. Catch you later.
All right. Bye bye. Well, thank you for joining me for another episode of the High Desert Luthiery podcast. Thank you for Tobin for recommending that we get together like this. It's been quite some time since the last episode, but you can expect those old interviews of people from past shows to come out sooner or later. And if you're listening to this, if you're one of the luthiers, that have been waiting, we haven't forgotten. It's just been a matter of circumstance and we will get back to it. We certainly will. You can look up Tobin at his Instagram, his website, Stringed Instrument Roadshow. The more we look this up, the more we Google search it, the more he's going to be relevant. So, Stringed Instrument Roadshow. Tobin Schaefer is spearheading that movement and it's wonderful. It's a wonderful thing. And just to give a shout out to the guys up in Utah Guitar Exhibition, look them up as well. The more you look them up, search for them, the more it's going to help them be found. If you want to learn more about anything that Allison and I are doing, highdesertluthery.com is our website. You can get to all of our socials. If you want to reach me, go to the website. My phone number's on there, my email's on there. You can also go to ungaguitars.com. I teach Luthiery guitar making. If this is something that you want to take up, if it's something you've been thinking about, you don't have to be a player at all. You can simply want to make a guitar. Maybe you have someone in your life that plays and you want to make them something. It can totally be done. I love teaching. I love seeing what comes out of people as their art, what their instruments end up being. It's very exciting. HungaGuitars.com, you can learn more about that. I need to post up my repair sheet as well on Unga Guitars. There's a lot that I do that I haven't done for a while that I'm getting back into. But the HDLI is number one right now. Happiness is tied with that. And thank you to Allison for all the editing. Thank you to Allison for all the help with High Desert Luthiery and even all the help she gives me with my Unga guitar stuff. Very grateful. And thank you for joining me on this sort of elongated episode. Me coming out of a long break off doing this podcast. And the official announcement is that I am Perry from Unga Guitars. Thank you for joining me for the High Desert Luthiery podcast. If I don't see you at the next High Desert Luthiery Invitational in December, I will see you hopefully at a future one. I will see you all in the next one. Bye bye.